Hi, everyone. Welcome to Optimizing Energy and Asset Management through Smart Street Lighting. My name is Laura Murphy here with Tech Connect, and I'm joined by an awesome panel. They're here to tell you all about how utilities and cities upgrading their streetlight assets can realize significant energy efficiency savings, network controls, and enhance energy and asset management capabilities, along with a number of other fantastic benefits. So we're here to hear their stories, understand some of those tangible actionable benefits and ways we can navigate those changes in our own communities. And I am here to just make sure that everyone knows the ground rules. So those are, everyone will remain on mute, except if you have questions, please don't hesitate to submit them. You can put them in the questions panel on the control panel over here. And this panel will get to as many as possible at the end of the discussion. So getting to the good stuff, I'll go ahead and share who's here with us today. We have Keith Chinchar from Ubicquia, Brad Gates from Memphis Light, Gas, and Water, Steve Seyfried from Amoresco, and Ben Gardner from Northeast Group. And Ben will moderate this discussion and take us on the journey. So we look forward to your questions, and thanks, panel, for being here.
Well, thank you, Laura, and welcome everyone to the panel entitled Optimizing Energy and Utility Asset Management Through Smart Street Lighting. So today's webinar will look at some of the benefits achieved from recent smart street lighting projects, and these include energy savings, but also crucially, very significant O&M savings that are actually often larger than the energy savings. So some topics that we'll cover include things like details on LED conversions, the benefits from adding network lighting controls or smart street lights, what specific O&M savings have been achieved, some public safety and some quality of life benefits, and some nuances around the individual utility projects. So just quick introduction for myself. My name is Ben Gardner from Northeast Group. We are a smart infrastructure market intelligence firm, and we were founded back in 2010. And we've been covering the street lighting market since 2012, so for quite a while. We also cover smart metering and other smart utility infrastructure segments. So as Laura said, we're joined by three esteemed panelists: Steve Seyfried from Amoresco, Brad Gates from MLGW, and also Keith Chinchar from Ubicquia. So I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves soon, but we thought we'd do a few quick icebreakers just to kind of get everyone comfortable before we start with the webinar. So I guess we'll start with kind of Steve and work our way around alphabetical as we do these. So first quick icebreaker, Steve, Netflix, Hulu, or Apple TV? See, I think you're on mute, Steve.
Yeah, would you believe me if I'm completely offline? I wouldn't either. So Netflix is by far my top choice.
Awesome, Netflix. Keith, you're up. Also on mute. Oh, there we go.
I'm gonna go Prime.
Nice. Okay. Off. Enjoy. And Brad?
YouTube.
Nice. I'm a big YouTube fan myself. Okay, very quickly, got two more quick ones. Favorite decade, the 1980s or the 90s, and why?
It's got to be the 80s. I mean, 80s rock by far.
Nice. Keith?
80s. The music, punk, metal, new wave. You know, it's unbeatable. I'm glad I didn't miss it.
Brad?
I'm going to do the 90s to be different due to the sports, Jordan era, Atlanta Braves, good competition. So I'm going to do the 90s.
Nice, solid decade. Okay, and last is industry specific. Cobra Head or decorative acorn street lights, Steve?
I'm a straightforward guy. Let's just do Cobra Head. Cobra Head.
Nice, utilitarian.
Yes.
I'm a decorative guy. I love those old, one-off decoratives in the downtowns of cities. There's something unique about them.
Yeah, the aesthetics. And Brad?
I'm going to do the Cobras as well. I think that's the majority of our system, so I'm going to just follow suit with that.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, guys. So if we could do quick intros, I'd ask you to just do an introduction, 1 minute or less. Tell us a little bit about your role. What are your areas of responsibility? Are there any relevant details from your background, et cetera? And I guess, we can start with you, Steve, and kind of work our way around.
Yeah, sure. I actually come from the community development and economic development world and space. Ran a number of nonprofits, but more interestingly, Amoresco kind of represents that community development spirit, which I really love. And I am the senior account executive, live in Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee. My role is to help municipalities figure out how to best leverage energy savings and new green energy to help them achieve their goals, whether it's carbon related or financial, and do a lot of work with higher ed as well. But Amoresco thankfully has taught me quite a bit, and our team has taught me quite a bit about the lighting and controls industry, and it's really a pleasure to be part of this panel.
Great, thank you. Keith.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm the general manager of intelligent streetlight controls for Ubicquia, a Florida-based controls company. We're deployed in about over 900 cities and utilities, including 15 of the 30 largest cities by population. And I think what makes us unique in the marketplace is that we have a suite of platforms from intelligent controls to traffic analytics, public safety, power quality, and all of these leverage the streetlight platform. So when we look at controls, it's way beyond just lighting controls, and we take all of that data and put it back into our lighting control solution. I think that makes us unique.
Cool. And Brad.
Yes, I'm the Director of Electric Construction and Maintenance at Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. Memphis Light, Gas, and Water is the largest three-service utility in the U.S. We have about 440,000 customers. I oversee the operation and maintenance, distribution, transmission, as well as the street lights. I'm also involved with the tree trimming, facility location, and then our contracted resources here at MLGW. I got kind of nominated to be put on this streetlight project to oversee it back in 22. So I've been working closely with Steve and Keith as we rolled out this project. So it's a little bit about me. Really excited to be here and share some to-dos and not to-dos, hopefully, for future customers.
Nice. Thanks, guys. So we're going to leave as much time as possible at the end of this for the audience Q&A. So we'll probably try to wrap this by about 11:40 or so Eastern time, and then Laura's going to step back in and moderate the questions from the audience, so we can hear from all of you online and out there. So, okay, guys, let's dive right into the panel here. So first questions for Brad at MLGW. Brad, could you kind of just tell us a little bit about your smart street lighting project and some of the benefits that you have been able to achieve?
Yes, so we, back in 23, I had to think about that a minute, it's been a couple of years ago. So we converted almost approximately 80,000 street lights to LED with the smart controllers. And the main reason we did that is several. One being the 55% energy savings that we were projected to receive. Two, reduce carbon emissions by 26,000 metric tons. And the biggest one for me, since I'm over the streetlight maintenance group, was the third, was 50% less truck rolls. That's the main one I was focused on. Also, we projected a decrease in crime, and what we saw the following year was a 13% decrease in crime. So we were glad that we were able to achieve what we spoke at when we were rolling out the project. And then another one that's a main one is customer service. In the past, we always had to rely on customers calling in when a street light was out. Well, due to the technology of the smart node, the Ubicquia smart node that we used, it notifies us before the customer knows. So therefore, we don't have to rely on the customer calling in every and each light. We can be proactive versus reactive. And one thing that we also did that this may benefit is back in the winter of 24, we're a customer of TVA, and we were really at high peak loads. So what we did is, using the smart node, we dimmed all of the street lights in the city of Memphis by 25% to see a savings of 1.4 megawatts load off the grid. So that's something that was really unique that we thought we came up with, or not maybe come up with, but we integrated and implemented. So we really thought that was a good thing to help our community as well as our partners across the state and the valley to help them out as well. So with
That's
all of those said,
really
it was like a
interesting.
no-brainer. Go ahead, Ben.
That's really interesting. I was going to say smart street lighting as a demand response tool, because I think that is still relatively rare to see. I don't know if you or any of the other panelists know of others that are doing that. I know at Northeast Group, we don't know of a ton of people doing that. So that is kind of a unique element or component to your project.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Both of
and
you are a
Keith,
little bit more about
yeah,
their key.
Keith and I spoke about this, and he can add some more to it.
yeah, no, Brad definitely led the way in kind of a new technology and using existing technology in a different way. And we are seeing other cities that we work with closely. In fact, we had another city in Tennessee approach us and say, hey, we'd like to do this. So, and Brad happened to be standing within earshot, and we said, I already do this. Like, we do this. So, yeah, so we're starting to see more and more cities use that as an option. It's really a simple thing to do to schedule, and through the software, it can even be linked to be automated. So the city doesn't have to do anything. It can just be as simple as, when we meet this demand from a utility, scale of streetlights back. So it's been a really good feature that we've put out there.
Great, thank you. I'll actually stay with you, Keith. I was wondering, you've worked on a ton of these projects. Maybe if you could share kind of some of the specific benefits you've seen either at utility projects or city-based smart street lighting projects. What's kind of out there? Both things Brad has maybe already hit on, or anything that he may have not touched on yet.
I think the biggest thing for us is, when we collect over 12 million data points per hour. That's through all the different platforms, public safety, traffic analytics. We do grid quality, power control, power quality monitoring. And when you have that much input and you're able to take all of it and make decisions based on it, we're starting to roll out benefits, and we've already had benefits in place for years now on, like, detecting copper theft, for example. And that requires close coordination with a municipality or city, because what we see is copper theft. We can see it electrically in our panel and through our insights, but the city has to confirm that. So we've worked with multiple large cities to make sure that the algorithms that see it are indeed catching or seeing copper theft. Then you have, just basics like Brad talked about, reducing truck rolls. That's a very, open statement to reduce truck rolls, right? Because when you implement a system like this, you're going to have a lot of alerts and a lot of alarms. So theoretically, you can have more truck rolls, right? Because now you're seeing it all versus what just people call in about. So the actionable insights that we take, which is all those inputs, and then say what really truly needs to be acted on, is how you reduce truck rolls. So you're not only looking at what is a true outage, like it's not temporary. Somebody can report an outage today that is gone tomorrow at circuit level. But where's the asset? Who owns the asset? Am I rolling a truck for an asset that, a commercial customer owns, and it's not a city asset or a utility asset? So all of those things add up, and being able to cluster tickets so that when I do send a truck, I can do 5 lights versus 1 or 2. And I'm not being reactive. I can be proactive. And, it's getting to the point where when you create that ticket, that it's actionable. It's not so those no trouble found truck rolls are essentially eliminated or greatly reduced. I know, we have a large city customer on the West Coast that, they look at it as, if they compared our actionable insights versus what they were doing with a different control system. And they found out that just on the 35,000 controls that they have installed, they would have gone out almost 3,000 fewer trips. At $800 a truck roll, that's,
It adds
close
up.
to 3 million in savings, right?
Yeah.
We've focused a lot on energy savings over the years, right? But the O&M side, now that it's been out here and tested and proven, and then customers come back to us with things like what Brad did with load shed, and what other cities have done with just calculating the difference in truck rolls. It shows you the true benefit of controls, and I think that's the huge difference over the last few years is having the data and the system to do it.
Thanks, Keith. Steve, moving over to you, Amoresco, you help often with the auditing, the management, and the financing of projects. Could you kind of share with us a little bit about the role that you play as a stakeholder in these types of projects?
Yeah, sure. A lot of utilities take great pride in their maintenance and how they work to be as effective and as efficient as they can. But a lot of times these projects, uh, they just take a lot of effort and time to get up and running. And there's a lot of risk. There's a number of cities that we've talked to where they um, they've tried LED or they've done small pilots and they've been less than satisfied. And what we've come to find out is that there's a lot to know. I mean, we've done about 1 million lights for over 60 cities and utilities, and that with that comes a lot of a learning curve that most utilities just won't be able to have. I mean, they're great at maintaining what they have, but when it comes to a large turnkey project, it might really challenge them. They may need to staff up. So where Amoresco comes into this is first to be a trusted partner who can give them good advice and allow them to make choices that they're confident in. So, we would help them narrow the lighting choices and the controls choices that they have so that they know the pros and cons and they can actually get the best system for their grid and their network. So that's one thing that we just, it's just we've learned the hard way, what works and what doesn't in terms of product and partnerships. The other thing is we can execute a project really quickly and effectively. And MLGW Memphis is a great example. Full disclosure, we had a mayor with the city who was getting ready to be in his last term limit year, and he said, I want 80,000 lights installed in 12 months. And that, in partnership with MLGW, gave us a huge challenge. So we executed with, I think we were up to 31 or 32 crews at any one time. And the benefits of executing quickly is not just that it's you get it done and the visual results are pretty impactful and more quickly. The energy savings are hugely more valuable. If you string these projects out over 5-10 years, the savings that you're leaving on the table, the difference in quality of product over time, all of these things impact the effectiveness and efficiency of your system. So being able to execute projects quickly and at scale is a real value to a lot of our partners. Also, there are financing ways that dollars and financing we can bring to these projects, but probably as good a value as anything is we have a national footprint, and we can help make sure that projects benefit from the buying and national footprint that Amoresco has. So you may be able to, utilities oftentimes will have ongoing contracts with lighting, maybe even controls providers. We can help reset that to where you're getting the best price because we've bought 80,000 lights in MLGW. We're working in Philadelphia with Ubicquia right now, and we have huge buying power and economy of scale that we can bring to our customers. So those things matter. And at the end of the day, do the lights work? And are the controls integrated? And in some ways, on the surface, you would think, well, that just happens kind of naturally and it all falls together. But integrating controls and lights, preparing for other smart city applications you want down the road, it really takes some expertise and skill to pull that off. And Amoresco brings together parties even outside of the suppliers, consultants, and the others, just to make sure the project's done on time, it's done well, and that it's warranted correctly, and that those warranties are enforced. So we're kind of the easy button or no risk button, if you want to call it, to help you make sure you're making the right decisions as a utility or as a higher ed or as a city. You're making the best decisions you can with all the information available to you through us. So
I imagine when the mayor came to you and said, "I want this done in 12 months," your blood pressure went up quite a bit.
it
That's no
did.
small ask.
Well, and it, and as these projects go, things get delayed and timelines get pushed out. And so we really did have to meet some timelines, but there was no more pressure on us than there was on Brad Gates. I mean, he was in the
That's
center of it. He was in the middle of it. He had to make sure that we executed, and it ended up working out really well for all of us. And we're really proud of the effort. And we're still we're finishing up a phase 2 with some grid, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But these kind of projects are truly a partnership, and you make mistakes, you make corrections. It just, I can't say enough about MLGW as a partner.
80,000 streetlights in 11 months. That's remarkable. I mean, we've worked on, like I said, over 900 projects in the US alone, and I don't know that anyone's ever achieved that speed and that massive a project in that amount of time. It's great.
And like
that's
you all were
actually
talking about, those quick benefits mean that the demand response component
Yeah.
is
And
available.
now it's right, it's up in 11 months. And now the benefit now is you've got, all this back end savings and support that you get to your residents that you're realizing from 11 months into the project. So that's great.
Immediately, as opposed to 5 years. And
Yeah.
costs go up over those 5 years. So
Yeah.
it was really a shrewd and remarkable decision by MLGW to take it on in this way.
that's a great segue back to Brad. Brad, after this rapid fire deployment in 11 months, is there any kind of advice you would give to other utilities or other cities that are looking to undertake this type of project, that you learned kind of through that, drinking from the fire hose type of deployment?
Yeah, and that's a good segue because he said 11 months, and we really could have done quicker than 11 months, but we got held up on some fixture lead times due to the lack of doing a pre-GIS audit. So that's one thing I would note, since we were in a sprint to get this thing rolled out and completed. We just said we'll just use MLGW's GIS data to go off of. And as we found out that we were short, several thousand fixtures, because our data hadn't been, entirely correct. But then we had to order new fixtures, resulting in some lead time. So yeah, I think we could have probably done it in 8 to 9 months, but we'll take 11. That's a pretty good win for us. And also, so I would suggest do a pre-audit if you have the time. And also, just because the lights are changed out doesn't mean they're going to work if your infrastructure is not up to par. That's what we're seeing currently, and working with Amoresco as well in phase 2 is trying to update our infrastructure, especially the underground portion of it. But we've had some cable that has been in the ground for 50 plus years. It's due to fail. So we're going back and, repairing these, making these repairs after the fact. So if there's some way to incorporate maybe, upgrading the infrastructure as you do the conversion, that might win you some points with your customer base, because now they see us doing all these conversions and the light's still not working. It takes a minute for them to register why are the lights still not working. We spent X amount of dollars, they should be working, right? But in the real-time world that we all know is that if the system's underutilized or not working properly, the lights are not going to work. So I'd invest in some funds for some make readies as you go. That way you can, while you're there, make the necessary repairs to get the lights working, and that reaps benefits from your customer base. Those two are the biggest hurdles and the biggest things that we're still working on. Outside of that, everything was smoother than I anticipated. Amoresco and Ubicquia, great partners. Really enjoyed working for them. All we had to do is pick up a phone call if we had an issue, and they'd be there to rescue us out. So it's been a great partnership, and looking forward to continue to finish up this phase 2 and 3 as we move forward. So those two things are the biggest hurdles.
I'm
Yeah,
kind
and I
of
think
curious too, from Ben and Keith's perspective. In Memphis, in MLGW's grid, issues were already there, but they come and go. This is old infrastructure, so sometimes you're never at a 0% or failure rate. You're always in a range where things are happening within the grid, poles are getting hit by cars, etc. I've heard from our friends and partners, we're looking at about a 5 to 10% failure rate, even post installation for some of these systems. What have you heard out from your partners on this in terms of an ongoing failure rate for lights, street lighting?
I think for me, when I look at existing installations, we put in a panel and people are like, hey, I have lights out. Is there something wrong with the panel? No, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's doing what it's designed to do. Yes, you put in new fixtures, and yes, they are out. Because just because you reset doesn't mean all of the variables that caused lights to go out in the first place have disappeared, right? You still have an undervoltage situation where a light might flicker, which we can detect and tell you your lights are flickering. So the controls do what they're designed to do, but it from when we say failure, it's hard to say from a product standpoint. Less than 0.25% failure rate from a hardware. From a system level, you're still going to have. That's why you're putting this in, right? You're still going to have truck rolls but you just want to make sure you're going out when you need to go out, as opposed to just sending trucks, right? So to answer your question, I don't know that there's a percentage that I can add to it, but I feel like the system will do what it's designed to do, and you're just going to be more efficient at finding those failures as opposed to guessing like you did in the past.
yeah,
But for me, Ben, the
those issues.
biggest lesson learned was being flexible, right? And being agile. When you're working with an MLGW or any utility or city, the needs will change, right? Whether that's the technology and the project itself, or requests or demands from your constituents, whether that's above you or city residents. Some of the needs will change, whether it's a load shed was not part of the original scope, right? But how are you flexible enough to implement something like that? So every utility and city will have some unique aspect to what they want to do. And do you have a platform capable of doing that? And do you have a team willing to listen and implement those changes? And I think for me, as we've done so many of these over the years, that agility and flexibility it always comes back to say, who we are today versus who we were 4 years ago is completely different, because our customers have constantly evolved, and so have we. We've had to implement those adjustments as we've gone, and every quarter there's a software update that comes out, and it's not necessarily fixing things, it's adding features. It's copper theft was not a feature we had 4 years ago, but 2 years ago it was. And load shed is a year old. So as we move along here, we evolve, and that's, to me, the biggest learning lesson is you have to evolve.
I think there's a lot of use cases and benefits from these systems that utilities and cities aren't yet utilizing, but they can. So there's definitely a future where there's going to be increased value extracted from rolling out these types of systems. I'd like to kind of stick a little bit with the kind of quantitative O&M benefits theme. Keith, you touched on this figure you threw out, about $3 million in truck rolls. It's something in the industry, everyone challenges with putting a concrete number on benefits, because some benefits, as we all know, like public safety, for example, is a qualitative benefit. It's a huge benefit, but it's very difficult to quantify, the cost of a human life or an injury or something like that. But what of the benefits, and especially in the O&M world, which ones can we kind of quantify and try to put either a percentage savings on or a dollar savings figure on? Keith, you can kick it off, and Brad or Steve, if you have anything to add, please feel free to jump in.
I think you step back and look at what is your process today before putting a control system in. And you take that process, which is somebody calls in an outage, you create a work order, and the best information you have is somebody reported an outage and I kind of know where, right? That's what you typically have. So if you change that process to, I know where the light is, I know I own the asset, I know that it is truly worth going out and fixing, and I can cluster them and do them in a manner that's, more efficient. That takes individual haphazard reactive truck rolls to assets you may or may not own, to lights that may or may not be on, into I'm going out there with a specific purpose. And if you compare the number of no fault found or no trouble found trips prior to post, it's night and day. So if you can put a dollar value on a specific truck roll and then calculate that with insights, you will see a huge financial difference. And it's a very, very simple calculation. We have ROI tools that can help anyone calculate this if they so wish to. It's just inputting my kilowatt hours to get energy savings if I get a tariff reduction. And we've even seen cities, like Philadelphia, who are able to get a reduction in energy cost and use the control system as an audit tool, right? So that if the utility wants to double check what the settings were, they're all available and can pull them in remotely. So specifically knowing the value of a truck roll for you and then what energy savings you can have, those are very quantifiable, and it's based not off of what it could be or should be, it's based off of actual experience and looking at hard data of prior and post installation. I think Brad can probably relate to that.
Yeah, I'll jump in there real quick. So
Go ahead, Brad.
in 2022, before we did the conversion, we had 24,000 truck rolls. So last year we had about 18,000, just because we're still fixing problems, and we're projecting that to go down to 50%, 12,000 at the most. So yeah, you can just take your truck costs, like Keith mentioned earlier. I think you quoted $800, whatever it may be, times the truck rolls, then you'll see a savings. I mean, just like I said, I think that's about $3 million just right off the top that we're saving just from 1 year's worth of data. So definitely it's a bargain, and we're seeing these improvements made by simple, like Keith mentioned, ROI stuff that you can just do on your own very, very quick just to see the benefits. And that's what we did.
It's amazing. So cutting your truck rolls in half, basically. Keith, you were talking about Philadelphia. I remember several years ago, I was talking with someone who was running that project, and they said that they had 2 FTEs, so 2 full-time equivalent, basically just driving the city at night looking for streetlight outages. Just driving, block to block, zigzagging throughout the city. And that obviously goes away when you have a control on the streetlight that's pinpointing where the outage is. So it's just a very inefficient way of working to a much more efficient and surgical way of doing maintenance, which is a big
It's
benefit.
inefficient and inaccurate, right? Because if it's out at that moment, doesn't mean it's necessarily going to remain out, right? So that's that actionable insight. The other side of the financial equation is, and maybe Steve can add to this, is you can do this as a service as well, right? So it doesn't need to be a capital expense up front. It could be done on an as a service model or a finance model, so that you can install the full amount up front of capital equipment and then finance it over time, so that your annual savings is higher than your cost, so that you're reaping the benefits from day one, and the delta of what you're saving could be significant.
Yeah, and they're also, let's say you've already done lights, street lights. I mean, installing controls in that way where you're paying a per pole cost, you'll see some savings um, in that arrangement as well. But something um, finance people, some that we work with, like to discuss is what we call avoided cost, and that's that those costs that you've avoided just simply by doing your project in a timely fashion. A lot of utilities will just replace their lights now with LED as they go out. And that will take them 5, 10, 15 years. And besides the inconsistency of light that gives you, and the less better looking lighting, and frankly less useful light, um, doing it in a turnkey or in phases, in large phases, give you huge savings. Not only the energy savings that you're capturing, instead of capturing 1/15 of that over every year going forward, savings this year, a little more savings, a little more. Those savings are directly related to rate increases and more expensive energy. So, doing these projects up front, you can very um, effectively and quickly assess how much cost you're avoiding by doing it in 1 or 2 or 3 phases, as opposed to spreading it out over 10 or 15 years. And it's dramatic. It's not just a small little piece. It's energy savings plus the future value of energy cost, which is um, not negligible.
Good. We've got about, I think, 3 minutes till we open it up for Q&A. So I thought we could kind of close this part of the discussion out with maybe a hard lessons learned event. Each panelist could kind of chime in and just share something they learned the hard way. Is there something, in your project that you would maybe do differently if you got a chance to do it again? Something that you'd kind of like to put on the radars of anyone else looking to do these types of projects to maybe avoid or, not learn it the hard way. We could start, I guess maybe we'll go counterclockwise since we always seem to go clockwise. So maybe Brad, if you want to kick it off, and then Keith and Steve can chime in as well.
Yeah, I kind of hit on the two that really was the hardships for MLGW. Another one would be I would dedicate a team, a conversion team, to address the project, depending on the magnitude. I mean, ours was 80,000. Now we're up to 100,000 lights being converted. I would probably designate a team of, 5 to 10 individuals that can handle the engineering, the construction, the invoicing, total, kit and caboodle, so to speak. So that way, you don't get distracted from other chores, I think. And that's kind of way, with me trying to multitask, it felt like sometimes I didn't get my full attention to Steve and his team. I would say I'd dedicate a group of resources just for that project and get it knocked out. And then you can go back to your normal, normal duties. That'd be my suggestion.
Great, thanks. Keith, you've been in the industry a long time. What have you learned the hard way, the painful way?
I think, and I really do have to go back to years and years ago, more so than at Ubicquia. It's that setting customer expectations up front, right? When you launch a wireless control system into a city, um, the process to get it up and running, we've come a long way technology wise. The auto connect of the nodes and commissioning is very, very simple today, at least at Ubicquia. But the explanation of what can happen with billboards shining in and lights shining into others, just setting that expectation up front so that when these things happen, Brad is in that seat of what's going on. I just put new lights in, now they're flickering. What did you do, right? Having the ability to explain that to either peers or constituents or residents is critical so that people don't panic. They just understand that this is part of the upgrade process. These things will happen. That to me, and having that ability to communicate to your residents what's going to occur, in advance, I think is critical. But thankfully, I think those are far and few between from where they were 10, 15 years ago, it was we didn't know then. Whereas now, I think we have that the value of experience behind us. So
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit there at the end, the community engagement piece, because I
yeah,
think oftentimes, especially with the early projects, that was sort of an afterthought about engaging with the
correct.
community. But I think as an industry, we're getting better with that now. But it's a really important part of these projects.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that too. I mean, when I look at controls, the value of controls are still. I'm hopefully this call sheds a light on a little bit more of what the value really is. There's still a little bit of a hesitancy. Why do I need controls? And so communicating the benefit of controls, and people don't necessarily know what that node is on top of the light and what it does, and how does that relate to carbon emission reduction and reducing costs for the city. You know, some of that needs to be done up front as well.
Yeah. Great. And Steve, to close it out, any hard lessons learned, any painful experiences?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of excitement in these projects, and sometimes uh, Keith's right. Customer expectations and our expectations often aren't as clearly aligned as they could be. And these are expensive projects, and so that those costs are often there's a hesitancy for us to um, really push. We being Amoresco, our customers to say, there's a lot of work we can do on this project that will make operations and maintenance upgrades, whether it's grounding wires or pole replacement or underground wiring. There's a lot of work that is going to be a lot more effectively done during this project. Consider it an infrastructure upgrade, not just an LED. And the lesson learned is that um, sometimes we sell those benefits short up front because the costs are so high. And I think if we can look at those with our customer very clearly and say, all right, here's the overall work, given your input and our expertise, what needs to be done. How do we finance that in a way that it's not as huge a lift for the utility or municipality, and you're able to get all of that work done that you need to get done? Because like Brad was saying, we used this opportunity, and it was very instructive to kind of help point out the grid inefficiencies or effectiveness, and not inefficiencies as much as just grid issues. And so um, we were identifying those during the project. But if we were able to get some of those done during the project, when it's done, it's really a lot more substantially done in the view of the public, because it's a challenge to put all this work in and then still see about 6% of the lights out um, for valid reasons. But I think those are good lessons learned that I want to impart to everybody who's listening. It's worth it to get as much done as you can, even if you have to phase it over 2 or 3 phases. Make sure that's part of your project.
Great. Thanks, guys. Yeah, with any project, there's always kinks to work out. So thank you for sharing some of those lessons to hopefully save some headaches for those listening in today for their projects they may do in the future. I believe Laura is going to rejoin us now, and she is going to help to moderate. Yes, there she is. Great. Help moderate some of the audience Q&A. So we would just encourage everyone who's listening in today, send us your hard questions. Hopefully we can give you some advice and help you out for your project, or kind of help educate you about some of the benefits of doing these things. So I will be quiet now and hand it over to Laura.
All right, thanks you guys. This was really great, and really appreciate all the insights you've already given. We do have a number of questions that have come in, so I'll just kind of start jumping into those. And if you have others, audience, keep them coming. We'll get to what we can. So Andrew asked, what are the processes for evaluating lighting coverage?
So, and this is what Brad was talking about earlier, is if you can complete an audit beforehand that will, one, validate and quantify what your existing coverage is. And then two, you can evaluate, is that good enough? Is that strong enough? In Chicago, their goal was keyhole to keyhole, door key to front to car core, your car door to your front door key. So they wanted lighting everywhere in the city for folks in residential areas to get where they need to go. That's a pretty aggressive lighting standard. And of course, there's standards, lots of different international standards that cities can adhere to, utilities can go by. But you want to make sure to do that audit, understand where you are, and then decide, with the help of your partner who understands this, what is an effective coverage and how will that impact your project's cost and scope.
Great.
Yeah, and from our project, Amoresco helped with us develop us a spreadsheet of all the different vendors and lights, the photometrics, what they provided, what they couldn't provide, because MLGW has their own lighting standards. So we incorporated both, as Steve mentioned, cost as well. And then we came up with a plan on which fixtures to purchase and to install based on the photometrics and cost.
And as you remember, Brad, we were anticipating on your behalf some of the color conversations that were going to come out too from some of the advocacy groups in terms of what's a safe color, and of course there's pros and cons. There's not as much a safety factor in those assessments, but a lot of things can be covered with a pre-project audit, and they don't take a whole lot of time or resources.
Yep.
As a follow-up to that, there's another question about whether aerial services are or could be used to help with this sort of identification and mapping in the early stages.
Yes. I mean, and it depends on the city, the grid, the lighting, and yes, I'm assuming they're talking about drones, but there's also internet-based technology that can really get you far down the road. And in some cases, you can even do an audit without being on the ground. You can do you can do some audits virtually or desktop and then supplement it with on the ground. So yeah, there's lots of tools that you can use.
Great. It's good to know that y'all are thinking of all that and bringing that all to bear. All right. Cornelia asked, what resistance, if any, do you meet when implementing LED lights?
I mean, I'll just chime in a little bit here because I've been in the LED world now for 20 some years, or LEDs haven't been around since 2007. So when you look at some of the challenges you'll face in any community, and I always say this, like you know that there are people in your community that are going to complain. And when I say that, Brad's going to think of two people that he immediately says, I know who they are. So some of the challenges are around, it was briefly mentioned just now, picking the right color temperature of a fixture. When we first started lighting controls, the tendency was to go with a higher Kelvin rating, 4,000, sometimes higher. Current feeling is 3,000 Kelvin or lower, or thereabouts. Have the ability to have a control system to be flexible in your quantity of light output, right? Also, the phenomenon when you put in a new LED is that it will be brighter from the start than it will be at its life expectancy, because an LED is an organic device that will degrade over time as you put current through it. It's by design. So having a control system that can remove that glare up front reduces another challenge that people have with LEDs, is that initial brightness. So color, brightness, quantity of light, direction of light, all of those things matter. And all of those things are situations where you might have some pushback from people. If you can have a flexible enough plan and solution to address them, I think you'll go a long way in having a successful project.
And that's a great answer, Keith. And I also think there's still some people out there who don't believe LED is a proven technology from a warranty standpoint. And we are not finding that to be the case. These are you can find really good quality LED lights that will work and that will last 20 years. And one other pushback I get is on the cost. And that is sometimes utilities will say, well, we've got to raise our tariffs or our rates if we're going to do a large scale project. And, bottom line is these will, in most cases, almost, if not completely pay for themselves in terms of savings. But it's not going to be a 1-year savings. So sometimes that initial cost up front, and there are ways to mitigate that, as Keith's mentioned before. But that is often a big pushback I get from our potential customers.
Yeah. The uncertain future, even though it is certain in a case study sense, like how this is going to play out, but it still feels a little scary at the beginning. Yeah. All right. So a question from Dawn. So when we were discussing, Brad, you shared how you reduced the lighting, like turned down the lights a little bit, peak load, and that was a kind of a revelation, I think, to many of us who haven't really heard of that being done. So that was really unique. One of the questions that came out of that, though, is that if you're reducing lighting levels, let's say at night, are there liabilities associated with that, and who carries the liability for the street lights? So that could be a broad question, not just to you, Brad, but just as a rule. Have y'all seen kind of how does that liability question work out when it comes to lighting levels and the ownership of that?
Well, I'll speak from us since we own our lights and assets and we have our own legal team. So we did bounce that off of them prior to, and they felt like we were covered. So we didn't really have an issue with dimming and as a result of a liability issue or anything of that nature. So we double checked and we were good on our assets.
Mm-hmm.
I think to add to Brad, there's really two things that it comes down to with dimming. One is you can dim a light significantly without affecting the lumens on the street, right? So when you think about lighting, it's how much light are you putting onto the pavement? There are standards that say this is what is recommended, right? From a legal perspective, that's going to be up to every municipality to decide. But there are standards, and there are also, like as I mentioned, you can dim 40% before you even start to see an output. You can literally stand in the streets of Memphis,
Wow.
dim 40% and not perceive a difference. So
Wow.
there's a lot of flexibility in LEDs that I think people do not see. So dimming has always had this stigma behind it, but remember also that your light is probably 35% brighter than it should be when you buy it. So when you're dimming significantly, you're still dimming to the rated output of the fixture, which it's designed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you're just setting the light level to its proper value and still
Yeah,
dimming.
just to make sure folks understand that, Keith, a lot of munis will not put their lights at full strength right off the bat, even though they could. It's an energy savings thing, but it's also a length of light
Right.
bulb, length of bulb.
Lifespan.
Right.
Yes.
So you're kind of managing this. You're buying the light at a certain brightness, but you're managing it through controls to make sure it lasts longest and that you're getting consistent lighting throughout its lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That is very helpful. All right, we have a question from Herc who asked, do you have any lighting in your city that's owned by the residents or HOAs? And if so, how are you working with them, or have you, to sort of convert what they're doing as well?
Yeah, so the answer is no. So that the quick answer is no, but we do have some private lights that we install in HOAs and subdivisions, apartment complexes, commercial buildings, which is totally separate from our street light installs. So, but we do not work with customer-owned lights and how they. I mean, we could provide advice like this call, but other than that, we don't go out and design for, customer-owned lights. But we do have, MLGW has private lights that we do offer customers to purchase, and then we of course maintain and do design and purchasing and all of that for those. But we don't assist customer-owned lights.
Okay. Another question, did you receive or go after any grant funding? And if so, what did that look like? Process-wise, or any recommendations, advice?
Yeah, in the Tennessee Valley Authority or TVA area, they do give some rebates on lights that are installed, and that's a pretty standard thing across all utilities. I think we all are kind of interested to see where federal funding goes with all of the energy efficiency improvements that could happen. But bottom line is, oftentimes utilities will offer those, but that's probably the only resource I'm aware of at this point for public utilities or municipalities.
We see some grants through Safer Streets for All. I think is probably one of the, especially for medium to small sized towns, that lighting directly affects pedestrian safety. And I think we've seen some success for cities getting SS4A or Safer Streets for All grants.
Is that a private organization, nonprofit? What, or how do they source their funds, Keith?
That's a good question, Steve. I do not know the answer to that.
It's not. I just thought I'd ask. I've heard of them, and I know we've used them on some other projects.
I would be lying if I told you, but I do not know.
Next question, right?
All right. James asked, and I think we only have a few more minutes, so if you have any final thoughts, get them in. James asked, what are your thoughts on decorative solar street lights? Do you use them? Does this work within our proposed engagements here? And if so, what are some preferred brands? City's getting the intel right here, hot.
This is great, and I wish I had an answer. I don't. Sorry.
I'll say this: decorative streetlights almost always fall into aesthetic scrutiny. So the ability to touch a decorative, even with a control, like our control goes inside a decorative because no one wants a control on the outside of a decorative. So we've had to design a control to fit in a decorative as an LTE control. So the ability to put a solar decorative would be interesting. We're starting to see some solar all-in-ones or distributed type fixtures put up. Certain cities have, and we have controls for those, but the volume is still relatively low. I've not seen. I guess they're all decorative in their own way, but I've not seen any true what I would call decorative solar light.
Artistry, yeah. It's all artistry, Keith. It's all artistry.
Yes,
that's right.
It is.
It's all subjective. All right. I think we have time for just one more. Are there any aspects to switching everything all at one time that maybe should give a city pause? Like, should they tier things, or is everything going to go out at once? How would you maybe answer a city looking to make a total switch at once?
It's such a great question, and I'll say this. LED street lighting is a very competitive business, and there have been some spectacular failures in the past with quality. But the key for municipalities and cities is get a partner to help you make sure. I'll give you one example. We met with utility, and I'll be quick. They had a spectacular failure with the pilot, about 3,000 installs. They bought from a supplier that normally was really good, but they had one bad year. Okay. One aberration in their whole, and the utility wasn't sophisticated enough to enforce the warranties. So they thought, well, here you got this bum, batch of lights. Well, if we knew about that situation, we could have helped that municipality make sure that they get all of their lights replaced with the next generation, which were all useful. You don't know what you don't know, but you can't enforce what you don't put in your warranties. And so it really, even if you want to execute these projects on your own as a municipality, get a partner who has had significant experience with lights and controls that can help you not only get the best price on those, but also make sure you're not getting a bad product.
All right. Well, we are unfortunately at time. I feel like we could keep going. Y'all are a fun crowd, and this is a good feeling. But we'll have to end it here. There are a few questions we didn't get to. We'll share them with the panel and try to get back to you directly following this. But everyone. Thank you so much for being here, for taking time, for asking questions, and all of your thoughtful advice. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.